Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. I'm Moreh, Rapha'Yah. We're just going to go ahead and start this amazing Torah portion, this Parashat, and this new year that we're just starting off really fresh. Remember that in this month of Abib is the month of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yahweh Sabaoth, our Creator, has set up for the beginning of the months. In this month, we are going to take off not only as a new year, but also as a new cycle of Torah portions. Everything begins on Abib, everything. And if you guys want to check this out, at the very end of the Torah portion, I'm going to put some links so you can guys watch a little bit of Noah's 43 days. It has a lot to do with 43. Very, very amazing. It will be right here at the very end. But let's just start off with these Torah portions. And we will talk about something that we have, it actually hasn't been touched for a while. And if it has, very lightly. And be right before we start, please subscribe if you have not subscribed to this channel so you can get the latest production. We always bring in new productions, so please subscribe so we can go ahead and start off. In this Torah portion, Parashat Noach, we will be talking about the flood, of course, just a little bit, but I do want to concentrate on the Tower of Babel, or what they call it today, the Tower of Babel. This tower is misunderstood for so long that we tend to think that it's just another tower, it's just another pyramid, but it's not. This was a tower that basically it was built in a certain place. It was built for a certain purpose, and we will talk about a little bit more of those details a little bit more on this little talk. So let's jump into it. Once again, I highly advise to take notes, because some of these things I do say verbally, and they're not on the slides, and they're very, very important. Let's jump into it. Parashat Noach in Moreh 1, it covers from 6 verse 9 all the way to 11 verse 32, and these are the Noah's generations, or Toledot. Remember we talked about Toledot last week? That's what it means. Noach was a tzaddik, a righteous man, and being a ta'amim, which is a perfect and unblemished in his Toledot, in his generations. Noah walked with Yahweh Almighty. In this very verse, we see so much that we can actually cover. The first one is the Toledot, the generations, has a lot to do with the gene pool. With his genes were not mixed. His genes were not mingled with. His genes were untouched. And the reason why we can pretty much see, and let's go back here, we can actually deduce with the word tamim. This word is very used word for so many verses in the Torah, where it actually speaks about the every korban, or every sacrifice. For example, the sheep or the bull or anything that was offered to Yahweh. Yahweh himself said that this tamim, this unblemished, this perfect sacrifice had to be perfect in every single way, which means that could not be, for instance, this sheep cannot have an eye, just one eye, or one 3 legs. It had to be perfect in every single way. So in the case of Noah, Yahweh says that he was untouched. He was not mingled with. And the reason why we can actually deduce this is because the generation that was on that particular time, that generation was all hybrids. They were mingled with the gene pool. Now let's continue. chapter 6, verse 3, Yahweh said, my ruach, my breath will not go on judging men forever. They are flesh. Therefore, their days will be 120. 120 happens to be 120 years of judgment. That frame time for men to have what is called today teshuvah, a shuvah, repentance, to return to Yahweh. But indeed, that wasn't the case, and it was not going to happen. Yahweh himself said that this generation was going to be exterminated for sure, because they have corrupt what Yahweh have intended with. Now, in 7 verse 11, chapter 7:11 of Genesis, on the 17th day of the second month of the 600 years of Noah's life, all the fountains of the great deep were broken, and the windows of the Shemayim in the heavens were open. We can pretty much see how Yahweh made this happen on this particular day. But the question remains, why had it be in this particular date? Why had it be on the 17th day of the second month? Why? Why could it be the first day of the second month? Why could it be on the first day of the first month, Abib? Why? Why had it be on that particular date? And there's always traces back to the Garden of Eden. Look at what the book of Rubel or Jubilee says about this situation or incident. Chapter 3, verse 17, and after the completion of the 7 years which he had completed there, 7 years exactly, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, the serpent came to the woman, and the serpent said to the woman, has Yahweh commanded you, saying, they shall not eat of every tree of the garden? She planted this question to the woman. Yahweh's direct command was without a question, without even thinking about it. Yahweh said, and it should be done. Yet the serpent planted this question on the woman's heart. And we know that what happened on that day was the fall of mankind. And the same reason Yahweh said in this same month, the flood came for the judgment. To see how everything that it will be again. I always say, brothers and sisters, that whatever it was, the past repeats itself in a different format, but it's basically the same thing. Let's continue. The Targum Jonathan, the Aramaic version of this verse, in the 600 years of Noah's life, in the second month, in the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep were broken. And the Nephilims, the giants, were gathered there with their sons and disturbed them. Who? Noah's. And then the windows of heaven were opened. They tried to stop Noah's. They tried to stop what was coming. They tried to get into this vessel. But it was not going to happen. Yahweh forbid them. Yahweh brought the great Mabul, the great flood, and that never happened. Yahweh caused it to rain 40 days and 40 nights. Similarly, Yahweh makes that generation of the great Mabul or flood because they corrupted the characteristics that form and take place in the 40 days on the womb of the mother. Look what it says, chapter 7, verse 4 of Genesis. For in 7 days more I will cause it to rain the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and then blotted out of the earth every living creature that I have made. So one of the reasons why Yahweh always similarly alludes to something that happens to be for us as humans. He alludes them and he puts them as a judgment. For some reason, Yahweh always make this happen. There has some kind of relationship to all of us. It is very important, brothers and sisters, to always remember why Yahweh has made this happen. He has made this happen for a reason. Chapter 6, verse 4, it says very clear here, and now the Nephilims, the hybrids, the giants were upon the earth on those days, and after that, when the sons of the Malachim of Ayil Almighty came to the daughters of men, and they begot children to them. They were the Gibborim, the brave, the powerful of all, men of renown. We know this very verse happens to be talking about the Bnei Ha'ayil. The Bnei Ha'ayil means the sons of the Almighty, which happens to be the Malachim, the angels, the messengers. Here we can see pretty much that this title belongs to, not to men, but to Malachim, the angels. We can see pretty much in the book of Job, chapter 1, where it says that the sons of Yahweh came to bow before Yahweh himself, and behind them or among them was Satan. We know that these sons of Yahil, sons of the Almighty, happens to be the Malachim. That's a title that was always given to them. But we know that these Gibborim were the giants. They were born to this mix, to this mixture of angel and woman. Now, this is something that Yahweh never intended to. This is never something that Yahweh wanted to the gene pool to be mixed. And there is a reason why always evil has to mingle into the humans. Is because they always want to distort what Yahweh has made to begin with. The original creation, in the case of Satan, always want to distort the plan of redemption. Remember that in the genes, for example, in Noah's situation, he needed to bring the Mashiach to the very latter end. Did you imagine if he makes the genes between genes and Nephilims and angels? Mashiach would not come. It had to be from mankind, this gene pool. And that is the reason why Yahweh spared Noah, because he had not mixed. He was a tzaddik. He was a righteous man. So that's one of the reasons why we have to take this in consideration, all these kind of situations. We've seen all this over and over again, the angels and mixed with humans, how these Nephilims, these giants, came to be. They were and before the flood, they were about 300 feet tall. After the flood, became a little bit lower in stature. After the flood, the latest that we have found is about 36 feet. Right here, on the 9 feet right here, happens to be Goliath. Goliath was about 9 feet, almost 10 feet tall. We know that through archaeology, we can see pretty much that these Nephilims are all over the cultures. It's being excavated by so many around the world. And once again, these Nephilims are being scattered around the world, and the Torah speaks about it. Now, you can see pretty much through the archaeology, like in Egyptian hieroglyphics, okay? And we can see pretty much a mixture of animal and humans, something that Yahweh never intended to it. That's why you see all these demigods, what they call it today. It's a mixture of man and animal. This one happens to be Nimrod. If you see him on the left side, on the right side, he's pretty much holding on to a little cat. That little cat happens to be a lion. The so-called Vikings today, here in North region, right, in Europe, if you see the axe here, those are real axe. They were actually Nephilims. They were giants. And when it comes to the dinosaurs, it also happens before the flood. This was a mixture of bird and reptile. All these reptiles and birds, this was a mixture. These were hybrids, in other words. All this, once again, we can see pretty much that in archaeology they've been found under the ground, buried with mud, because this happens to be before the flood. Now, we know these giants, these hybrids, were all over the world, and they have many, many different titles and names, but at the end of the day, these were the great Nephilims of all. Now, once again, this has a lot of cultures that you can see pretty much all kinds of depicting so many ways how they were, because they were real. They were not actually something mythical. It became a myth, but in reality, this was something that Yahweh made this happen. So, once again, this is all over the world, and this was well known back in those days. Now, when it comes to the flood itself, we know for a fact that this cover so many places around the world, globally speaking. But I want to talk about a little bit of Mauritania. Mauritania happens to be in the west side of the Sahara in Africa. This is called the eye of the desert of Africa. You can see pretty much like a disc, but this is not something natural. This is a man-made. And we can see pretty closer, the white stuff around happens to be sodium, aka salt. Why is salt in the middle of the desert? That is the question. And the reason for it is because of the Great Flood. This place here, this plateau here, is basically, you see the white stuff, that's salt. All this is what is known today as the ancient Atlantis. That was before the flood. And all that white stuff that you see is basically sodium or salt. All these ripples that you see here, those are ripples of water. But this is not like inches. These are miles and miles of distance, okay? These are miles and miles of distance. This is not something small. All these ripples are very, very huge. The same goes with the whole plateau that you see all the way around, because the flood was globally induced. And all this is the Atlantic right here. You see that? And this is how it was washed out to the ocean. You see that? The same as the ripples of water that you see around and how it leaves it in the beach. The same is with in the desert, because it was a great flood. It's not a wind pattern, but rather ripples of water. You see that? You can pretty much see the same format. This flood was something, once again, that it gives us the notion that this was not a local flood. This was something great. And we're going to move into a different theme, which I said it earlier, and we will talk about the Tower of Babel, which is the Tower of Babel. Now, the Tower of Babel, let's take off first of all with Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. Ham's sons were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Mizraim is Egypt, by the way. And here it says very clear that Cush happens to be Ham's one of the Ham's sons. But who was Cush? Cush obtained a high knowledge. This man was also evil, okay? And he happens to be the father of Nimrod. Chapter 10, verse 8. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be the Gibor, brave, powerful giant on earth. Now, this verse that I'm bringing right about now is one of the mythical things that you see around the world. Nimrod became, and the word became or began to be a Gibor, happens to be that he became, in other words, to be a giant. He began, or he became, or he transformed, so you understand what I'm saying, to be a giant. What kind of technology they use? In another time, we'll discuss it, because it's very, very extensive shurim. It's a very extensive teaching when it comes to themes like this. Now, all this happened in after the flood, okay? And they're still using technology, forbidden technology, okay? And how do we know that? Because what I'm about to show you next. Cush and Nimrod became so popular that their similarities were incorporated into many facets on empirical culture ever since. Cush, for example, also came to be as known as Thoth, Hermes, Mercury. Nimrod came to be known as names as Jupiter, Osiris, etc. So all these mythical names, they have this origin, and it all goes back to Babylon. Chapter 10, verse 9 of Genesis, or Bereshit, he was Gibor. You see that? Valiant, mighty, giant, hunter before. This word before means against Yahweh. For this reason, people says, like Nimrod, a Gibor, hunter, a mighty giant before or against Yahweh. And the reason why we give you the best translation is for you to have a better understanding why Nimrod was not good in the eyes of Yahweh. He was always against Yahweh. He was not a tzaddik man. He was a rasha. He was a very evil man. And I'm going to bring you more verses. This Nimrod was a hunter. We know that for a fact. We know that he was very powerful. We know that he was a giant. He was a Gibor. Book of Yashar 7:39. When Nimrod had returned cheerfully for the battle, having conquered his enemies and all his brothers, together with those who knew him before, gathered to make him a melech, to make him a king over them, and place the royal crown on his head. They made him a king. They made him to conquer all the places because they knew, their knowledge that he was very powerful. This man became very arrogant, okay? Very arrogant and very not humble in the eyes of Yahweh, and therefore Yahweh knew that something was going to escalate from that moment. Nowadays, we know that the United Nations have made their own building the same as the Tower of Babel. We know for a fact that even in tablets, we see this Gibor, this Nimrod, ruling over the nations. And we can see pretty much he happens to be bigger than the rest, which he was, and happens to be a giant, a Nephilim. We can see pretty much all over the tablets of Gilgamesh. I'm sure you heard of it. We can pretty much see that he is the same Nimrod. And he's holding a little cat, which happens to be a lion, by the way. Yasher 7:42, and while he reigned according to the desire of his heart, after he had conquered all his enemies around, he was advised for his advisors to build a city for his palace, and they did so. This palace, this building, needed to be in a certain place, in a certain direction, and it wasn't just any place that they were going to pick. Chapter 11, verse 11 verse 1 of Genesis, the earth used to be the same language, the same words. And it came to pass that they journeyed from the east, you see that, and found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. They picked this place, this precise place, to build a city, but merely to build happens to be a tower. Yasher 7:43. And they found a great valley facing the east, and they built it a great and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that Shinar built, because Yahweh have vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. There is a reason why it is written like this. There is a reason why they picked this place. There is a reason why Yahweh saw this and it wasn't that good. Let's find out why. 11 verse 4 of Genesis. They said, "Come, let us build a city with a tower that will have its top reaching to the Shemayim, to the heavens, so that we can make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the earth." They needed to put this name on heaven. They needed to come to the throne of Yahweh. That was basically the reason why. They needed to open a portal. They needed to open another portal to go to where Yahweh was. But that was not going to happen. Yahweh was not going to let that happen. Another dimension we're going to open. And we know for a fact today that even scientists say that there are 9 dimensions. Right now, for a fact, we know there are 4 dimensions. The first one is basically a picture. The second, that's the first dimension. Second is basically a TV, when you watch TV. The third dimension is basically the world that you live around you. That's 360 degrees. That's a third dimension. And the fourth dimension is basically upwards. Who speaks about all this? Even Shaul, Paul talks about this, about the fourth dimension, which another time we will talk about it. Now let's continue. Here we know that they needed to open a dimension, a portal, where Yahweh was. Yahweh was not going to allow them to make that. They knew they found this opening portal, but they needed to build in that precise place. And that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about the pyramids around the world. There are so many. It's not built in just any place. It's built in certain places where they can open a portal. All these pyramids around the world, like the pyramid Giza Plateau in Egypt, in Teotihuacan in Mexico, Chichen Itza in Mexico, in Peru, there are so many, and also in China, Antarctica, Bosnia. We can go on and on and on. There are many places around the earth where there are openings around the world. Once again, these are not just randomly picked. These are actually picked because they are opening portals. Yasher 7:44, Nimrod dwelt in Shinar and reigned securely and fought with his enemies and subdued them and prospered in all the battles, and his kingdom became very, very great. He was building up everything that you can think of. Now let's find out why. We can see pretty much here on this map, the Eretz Yisrael happens to be the land of Israel, happens to be on the left side, but Shinar today is somewhere in the Himalayas, somewhere. Okay, here is basically what Shinar is, and another time we will talk about exactly where Shinar is nowadays. Chapter 7, verse 45, or Yasher, and all the nations and tongues heard of his fame, gathered to him, which is Nimrod, and bowed down to the Lamb, and brought him offerings, and became his their master and king. All the nations around that acknowledged Nimrod knew how powerful Nimrod was. He wasn't just an any man. He became a Gibor. He became very powerful. And not only that, he was doing something even more so, that he needed to go where the throne of Yahweh was. But once again, that never happened. Chapter 7, verse 46, the whole earth was one of the one tongue and one in the same words of union. But Nimrod did not go into the ways of Yahweh, and he was more Rasha, more wicked than all men before him, even before the days of the great Mabul, which is the flood, until those days, which means that he was definitely an evil man. Let's find out what the word Babil means. Hosea chapter 7, verse 8. Ephraim mixes, the word is Balal, with the villages. Ephraim has become a half-baked cake. And the reason why I bring this verse is for us to have a better understanding about Babil or Babel today. Balal is become from that word. Balal means to mix and also means to confuse. That's why Yahweh confused the tongues there. A native Assyrian Akkadian name of the city of Babilu, which is Babel. Look at what it means, which means the gate of the Almighty. This gate that they needed to open to where Yahweh was, this was a portal. This was another dimension that needed to open, and yet Yahweh did not allow them to open that portal. Think it for a moment and let's use our thinking logic. Yahweh, for us as humans, nowadays the tallest buildings ever, it's somewhere in the Middle East and somewhere in China too. But in reality, can't even reach the atmosphere, much more the Milky Way. It is not possible. So how in the world they were going to open a make a tower reaching to the heavens where Yahweh is? Yahweh is not here. He is everywhere, but he's thrown into the light and the most light, which means that no man can actually have the access to where Yahweh is. Much more, he's not going to let any mortal come to his abode, or any Nephilim in this matter, which means that we don't have the capability to do it physically speaking. The only way for them to do it, to open a portal. And that's one of the reasons why they wanted to build this. But that was not going to happen. Let's read this. Ezekiel 12:13, and I will spread my net over him, and he will be caught in the snare. Then I will take him to the Babilah, which is Babylonia, to the land of the Kashtim. See that Babilah? It's never been Babel. The word is Babil. And it's very something that we need to understand. When it comes to names, it always has a different meaning, has a different way to pronounce. It's not the way it's been pronounced until now. Let's close this with this. Chapter 9, verse 23 of Yasher, and all the families gathered together, consisting of about 600,000, or actually 6 million, And they went to look for the vast piece of land to build the city on the tower, and they searched all over the land and found none like the valley of the east. You see that? It was a very specific place. 2 days walk around, and they travel there and they dwell there. And the reason why they gives you these details, in another time I will bring this up. Now, for where is it nowadays? This tower wasn't just any tower. Once again, this place wasn't just any place. It was a specific place. Once again, they found this place in the east of the land of Shinar. Yashar 9:24, and they began to make bricks and found burn fire to build the city and the tower they envisioned to complete. This was a task that they put themselves to. This was a task that needed to finish up, but then again, it was not going to be overnight. This tower was going to take some time. 9:25 of Yashar, and the building of the tower was a transgression and sin for them. They began to build it, and while they were building themselves again against Yahweh Almighty, Ayil, and the Shemaites, and they imagined in their hearts to fight against him, who's him, Yahweh, and ascend to the Shemaites, to the heavens. This once again was a tower that was totally against Yahweh's way and also will. 26. And the third party said, I will send to the Shemaim and crush it with bows and spears, which is a joke, by the way. And Yahweh knew all their deeds and all their evil thoughts. And he saw the city of the tower that they were building. They knew what they were in their hearts, but he was not going to let that happen. And all these people and all the families were divided in three parts. The first said that they will send to the Shemaim in the heavens and fight against Yahweh. The second said, I will ascend to the Shemaim heavens and place there our own Elohim, our own demons, and serve them. They want to replace, in other words, Yahweh with their own idols, their own demons. How absurd is this? It was not going to happen. So, all this, once again, we bring evidence after evidence how this evil generation have become. And we can see pretty much that all this has its ways. We can see pretty much this tablet with the guy right on top of him is right on the left side. We see small people, which is the servants of the tall guy, which happens to be Nimrod. And the one on the right, the tower there, happens to be the Tower of Babel. You can pretty much hear Nimrod and the Tower of Babel here. The tablet on the right side, that's the original one. And we can see pretty much the drawing on the left side. But this is pretty much how it looked if you were to see it originally in the very, very beginning. 9:27. And let's finish up with this. Let's close with this. And they were building a great city and a very tall and the stronger tower. And because of their height, the mortar and bricks did not reach the building on their ascent to it until those who climbed had completed the whole year after that. You see that? It took about a year to complete, to take the one brick all the way to the top. That's how high it was. Remember, there were no elevators. There were no lifts, what they call in Britain, and they were not. They didn't have a high technology, but they knew how to open that portal. They knew how to open this portal to where Yahweh was. But of course, Yahweh was not going to give them that availability. We see pretty much the evil hearts nowadays. Also, they're trying to do that. In another time, I will bring this collider here in Europe that they're trying, or they think they open a portal, a dimension. I'm not talking about where Yahweh is, but another dimension. And they did open it and something happened. In another time, I will bring it. For now, this is all. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We'll see you next time. May Yahweh gives us the strength and ability to learn more and more Torah. Happy New Year, and let's continue learning Torah. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. If you want to give us tzedakah, help us continue in this channel, and you want to share, please, the link is right below so this channel can continue. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We'll see you next time. Shabbat Shalom.
Toda Rabba. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. There's more content in production. Thank you.